What is the overarching energy of June? What are the hotspots and major transits? We're going to find out. Today, I am here with a legend in astrology that almost needs no introduction. He's been practicing and teaching astrology for decades and is an absolute Astrology Hub favorite. The one, the only, the Rick Merlin Levine. Welcome to the Astrology Hub podcast. I'm so happy you're here for the month of June.
Ta-da, 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 ta-da. Happy to be here. And when it comes to working on the forecast for June, Amanda, you're my first. Normally, I have a monthly I do and a live event I do up in Seattle. That's on YouTube. And usually I do those, and if there's an Astrology Hub thing. But this time, it's just afterwards. This time, here we are. I'm first.
I love it. I love it. I like it when we're your first. You're kind of like getting into.
Well, there's an advantage and disadvantage. I haven't worked. Usually, it takes me two or three times through until I really get a sense of the month. But I'm surprised that there's so much going on in June. And it's like when April happened and we looked forward to the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction and the eclipses and Pluto stuff. And wow, this is the month of the year. And then May, wow, May is like as big as Pluto is. I mean, as big as Pluto, as big as April. And we're still, it's like, and now we look forward to June and there's really no let up. I mean, there's some really big stuff happening in June.
Cannot wait to hear all about it. Let's start with this Jupiter and Mercury trine Pluto on June 2nd and 3rd.
Well, let's actually start with the fact that Jupiter takes a year to go through a sign, and Jupiter has just moved into Gemini. And so we're on the first week. I mean, Jupiter has not been in Gemini for a whole week yet. And because we have Pluto, it's retrograde. It's heading back slowly, to a few months, 3 months in, 2 months plus in Capricorn. But the thing is that at the beginning of the month, Pluto is still like just barely moving. It's not. It never gets to go really fast. It's really, really holding its position. And where is it holding its position? Well, it's right at the very, very beginning of Aquarius, which means that as Jupiter moves into Aquarius, it's going to immediately trine Pluto. And it's already doing that on the 1st. It's already doing that at the end of May. But when it clicks into Gemini, it is making that trine to Pluto, which is exact on June 2nd, 3rd. And I say that because it depends where you are on the planet. But into that, and this is where it gets really interesting, is that we have Venus changing signs. And Venus changes signs so that Venus actually moves into Gemini on the very last day of where's my brain? Of May. And so we open up the month of June, and we have Venus in Gemini making its trine also, both of them to Pluto, and that is incredibly potent, incredibly powerful.
Why? What's potent?
Well,
and powerful
because Pluto is powerful. Pluto is power. Pluto is transformation, its depth, its intensity, and we're all talking about Pluto's move through the sign of Aquarius, which we're really at the beginning of still. We got a couple of decades of that in front of us. And so as first the sun, when it moved into Gemini, it makes a trine to Pluto, and then Venus in Gemini, and it makes a trine to Pluto, and then Jupiter into Gemini, and it makes a trine to Pluto. And actually, I've just been saying Venus, but it's actually on June 2nd and 3rd. It's Mercury behind Venus. I'm sorry for that. Mercury coming into Gemini, which then it makes its trine to Pluto also. So we have the Jupiter and Mercury together making a trine to Pluto, giving us a sense of the power of Pluto in Aquarius. I think we're going to get another bump into the future, into that sense of what's coming around the corner. And in some ways, and this is the larger swing of events, this is really a setup for what's happening over the next year or years, because we've just had the sun move into Gemini, trine Pluto. Venus move into Gemini, trine Pluto. Now we have Mercury and Jupiter together moving into Gemini on a slower note, a deeper note, trining Pluto and connecting us to what's hidden coming up. Jupiter bringing it out into the open, the optimism, the potential. And it's really a setup because starting next year, as Uranus moves from Taurus into Gemini, it's going to do the same thing, except it's going to hold that position for a couple of years. And so that's really what May is, a glimpse into the future. And, and we're now going somewhere. For a year or two, it felt like we were stuck. And then for a year or two, we kept saying we're at the ending and the beginning, and things are changing, but we don't know where they're going yet. And we still really won't know for sure until perhaps maybe October, November, December, January, when we have election day and we have then Pluto having dipped back into Capricorn. Then when it moves back into Aquarius in December, and in the United States, at least, we have an inauguration of the new president. And that whole thing has its own level of craziness and power and topsy-turvy, everything, every which way. I don't care what side of any political spectrum anyone is on. These are crazy times. But there's movement now. And I think these trines to Pluto are going to kind of begin to show what some of that movement is, even though I don't think it's going to be fully resolved until later in the year.
Okay. That was so good. Did you say that next year Uranus is going to be trine Pluto?
Yeah, because
for 2 years?
Well, because they go retrograde, direct, both of them. It's on, and this is so important because you see, from a larger perspective, remember the 1960s was Uranus-Pluto conjoined.
Okay,
that was the defining thing of the 60s, and it was impactful from the beginning of the 60s all the way through the early 70s. And then when Uranus squared Pluto exactly between 2012 and 2015, but really it was the entire 2020s. You had all of the 60s back in our faces again. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, not necessarily those things, but civil rights. We had Ferguson, Missouri, and the George Floyd, and we had students on the streets. We had Occupy Wall Street, we had the Arab Spring, we had Occupy Madison, Wisconsin. It was again happening all over Tunisia and so on. And then we had the whole, what was the rise of feminism in the mid 60s. That second wave, we now had gay marriage and transgender and gender fluidity all over again. And we had, it's all those issues that were in the 60s during the Uranus-Pluto square of the 2010s, 2012 to 2015 exactly. They were all in our face again. Now, in 2025, 6, 7, 8, they're going to be making their first harmonious trine since the conjunction, the seed period. Think of it like a new moon, the conjunction of Uranus and Pluto. And I've been saying this for a while now, but my sense is that it's like if you take a metal like tin, it's bendable, but it's brittle. If you take a metal like copper, it's malleable and beautiful, but you can't use it for something functional other than art because it doesn't hold its shape. But when you melt tin and copper together, when it cures, it becomes bronze, which was important enough to create the Bronze Age, because all of a sudden we had the ability, the technology to make things that held their shape, because once it was solidified into its alloy bronze, you couldn't bend it anymore. And that's what's going to happen in 25, 26, 27, 28. Whatever it is that we're doing or not doing now is going to solidify into an alloy, and we're going to have a lot less choice than it's. That's why things are so crazy now, is that the choices are so great and they're swinging so widely. But that's why May is important, because May, June, and even into July, it's so important, because what we're doing now or what we don't do now is going to have really greater impact over the 26, 25, 26, 27.
Oh, wow. That is really powerful. So and we're literally on June 2nd still, but I need to ask.
Well, but it defines the month because remember, Jupiter stays in Gemini the entire year, and it's trine to Pluto right at the beginning of the month.
Okay.
Really sets this in tone. It sets a tone.
Okay, this is the whole tone. Okay. So when you're saying what we do or don't do this May, June, July, that it's a precursor to 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, and that we won't have as
but
much.
Amanda, it's not a precursor in as much as by the time we get to 26, 27, 28, things will have changed. Boom, changed. And we won't be able to undo what is unfolding then. We can still undo it now, whatever.
Okay, yes. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Now, what would a person do with that information when they're making decisions right now, when they're choosing paths, when they're when they're faced with different things in their life? How do they use this information to set themselves up for when it is less malleable to be in a direction or a path that feels right and aligned and all those good things?
Think cosmically, act locally. Seriously, it's a time to do what we need to do to transform hate into love. It's to get out of our old patterns based upon fears, whatever that is. So many of us are trapped, and I say so many of us, we're all included. We all have areas of our life where we're afraid where things are going, and yet it's the fear that gets in the way. It's what is it that I say? It's the fear of the fall that actually creates us hitting the ground when we fall. It's all illusion, and we have to act in a way that we're coming not from our fear of what some religion, government, parents, teacher. We're being told stuff, and there's no one size fits all here. But we have to free ourselves from the chironic, from the hurtful patterns that we've had in the past, so that we can act from the heart rather than the logical head, which has been tied up by things that we've learned. And the things that we've learned are not necessarily the things that are true.
I have chills all over my body, Rick. This is brilliant. Okay, so we have this setup. We have this glimpse into the future. We have, and it's very potent and relevant. So paying attention to where some of these deeper fears that are sometimes hidden, where they're still running the show, and doing what we can to start to shift that, right? And then do we have some support from, I know around the eclipses, we had Chiron was conjunct the North Node. So we had support with the Chiron themes. Do we have that coming up?
Well, we have support right now from these trines to Pluto. That's support.
Oh, okay. All right.
And we also have, we also have support from the fear of moving into the future so fast is what's making people crazy on whatever the issues are. People have fears built up around different things. And one of the things that also happens, we're going to go from June 2nd, 3rd, jump right to the end of the month to the June 29th, because both of these events are playing throughout the entire month. And on June 29th, Saturn stations retrograde. What that means is that all month, Saturn, which has been pushing us into the future, inch by inch by inch by inch by inch, slow, steady, it begins to slow down. And so it may feel on a deeper level where we're not getting to where we want to get to as fast, kind of like what people often say about a Mercury retrograde. But this is a much deeper note. But what it's doing is it's giving us time to ingest, maybe that's not the right word, to assimilate what we've ingested so that we can work with the energy on a larger level. Because when Saturn turns direct next, it's going to make a whoosh ahead. And again, next year we have Saturn and Neptune both entering Aries. And this is huge. I mean, the changes that are coming around the bend in 26, 27 are greater than anything that we've seen so far in our lives, or at least in the last decade or so. They're really big, and all of this has been a setup for that. And part of the frustration and the fear that people have is the frustration is that it's not happening already and we don't know what's going on. And the fear is that, oh my God, this is taking us in the wrong direction. And those two things, by the time we get around this bend, we'll be wherever we are and we'll have to deal with whatever it is we feared or were excited about.
Okay,
but Saturn's slowing down and Saturn's retrograde is important all month because we're getting a sense of the heaviness, the seriousness of what's going on.
I know we're here to talk about June, but you just said something that's too interesting to let it brush by. Can you give us the Cliff's Notes? And I know we'll have many more opportunities to go into this, Rick, over the next few months and years, but why is 2026 and 2027 so important?
Well, and actually I have, just so I don't mess up the dates, because I do have, this is something I've been working with and thinking about. Well, the reason is because it's rare for the slow-moving planets. We're talking, Jupiter is a year in a sign, but Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Saturn changes signs every 2.5 years. Uranus changes signs every 7 years. Neptune changes signs every 14 years. And Pluto varies from every 15 to 30 years. It's a wide swing because its orbit is so weird. Pluto is changing signs. It's not changed signs because it's changing signs because it's still at that cuspal point where it's been going back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius because it moves so slowly, it wiggles back and forth. So Pluto is changing signs from the feminine earth sign Capricorn into the masculine young Aquarius, intellectual air. Saturn is changing signs next year. Saturn actually moves into Aries, and Saturn moves into Aries in May of 2025. That's next year. It's a year from now. Neptune, also like Saturn in feminine watery Pisces, moves into Aries at the end of March of 2025. Uranus, which has been in Earth feminine yin Taurus for 7 years, moves into masculine air sign Gemini in July of 2025. So we have Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all moving from feminine, that would be soulful, earth water signs, into masculine, young, fire air signs. And it's huge. I've never seen those four moving so quickly together, elementally, all into things that are in the same polarity. And they're going to create trines and sextiles with each other like I've never seen. We can reserve this conversation on a deeper dive for another time, but this is huge. And May is part of this. I'm sorry, I keep saying May. June is part of the setup that we've already felt from the end of May, when both the Sun and Venus moved into Gemini, trining Pluto in Aquarius, followed at the beginning of the month by Mercury and Jupiter doing the same thing. But meanwhile, Saturn's going, screeching the brakes, holding back. Neptune is at 29 degrees of Pisces, heading right for 0 Aries, but it doesn't go there. And so that energy is also like holding back. Neptune doesn't turn retrograde until next month, until July. But Saturn and Neptune align at 0 degrees of Aries. And that's incredibly potent because that's the that's the beginning of the zodiac. That's the Aries point. And that alignment is also going to be incredibly potent at 0 degrees of Aries. Again, it's astrologers all around are already saying, ain't ever seen anything quite like this one.
And when is that happening exactly?
The Saturn conjunction with it's 2026, and I'm not seeing it here.
2026. Okay, so we have this month June 2024, giving us a glimpse into 2025, 2026,
2027, 2028. It's a big thump. It's like everything changes. By the way, the Saturn conjunct Neptune is in February 20th of 2026, year and a half down the road.
Okay, and at that point, the big slow moving planets will all be will have had moved into or will be moving into masculine fire signs.
Fire and air.
Masculine, fire, and air. And right now, they're mostly in feminine
water
and water. Okay.
Water and earth.
And earth. So this is going to shift the whole dynamic. And that's one of the reasons why you're saying right now we almost have a chance to get situated within ourselves.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Okay. So let's reel it back in and go back into June. So you just left off on the Saturn is going to be turning retrograde at the end of the month.
End of the month.
All month long, it's going very, very, very slow, allowing us an opportunity to process and integrate and have a deeper level of understanding of everything that's just transpired.
Yeah. And there's clues out there. And one of the clues is not specifically what's going on in the Middle East, although it is. It's what's going on in response to that and how widely bifurcated the movement of heart and of the people's intuition of what's going on compared to the Saturnian governmental structures that are keeping things in place in the status quo. And what we're seeing here, and again, this is maybe a longer term discussion, it goes back to what happened at the last time there was a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction when Pluto had first moved into Aquarius. That was 1789, when we had the first congressional session that set up the United States judicial system. It basically ratified the Constitution, and it happened within a couple of weeks of the storming of the Bastille, when it was assumed that no human group could ever overtake the monarchy. That was a divinely inspired control of everything that is, and we're right at the same tip of that right now. That's big stuff.
That's big stuff. Oh my gosh, Rick. So we have just teed up like 10 more episodes. If you all would like us to do some more episodes on these themes, put it in the comments, let us know. But okay, this is amazing. So this is a really dynamic month.
Well, it's a really dynamic year, and it's a really dynamic decade, and it's a really dynamic time to be alive.
Absolutely. Okay. So anything else that we need to pay attention to specifically for June?
Yeah. Well, obviously, we have the regular new moons and full moons, and I know that you'll be covering those in the inner circle, for those people there.
Right.
But the new moon in Gemini is very potent because it is squaring Saturn. And that's setting up that whole Saturn, the reality of what's, the nothing we do seems to be good enough. That Saturn square sun, Saturn square moon is like the feeling like we're not accomplishing what we need to accomplish. That Saturn authority is blocking our light. And in fact, that new moon in Gemini is also a square and a half to Pluto, which is a similar energy that, it's a tough new moon, I think. Even though we're getting some support still from that Jupiter trining Pluto that I talked about earlier. That's the good news. But it's still, we're going to be distracted by the Gemini new moon and feel like what we're doing isn't necessarily working the way we think it should.
And if people are feeling blocked by the Saturnian sort of structures, is that just information that they just to be aware of? Or is there actually something to do about that?
What there is to do about it is to not hit the gas pedal so hard that you go off the road and not run your head into the wall again so that you break your head, because the changes that are occurring are too big for us to just go crashing through them with good intentions and an accelerator pedal.
Okay, so have patience.
Now, and this feeds into the next important thing of the month, which is Mars makes a square to Pluto on June 11th. Mars moving out of Aries, where it's been for a bit, into Taurus. And because when any planet changes signs right now, it's going to make an aspect with Pluto at the very beginning of Aquarius. And so Mars moving into Taurus is going to square Pluto. And this is not easy. Remember, it was, in fact, Mars squaring Pluto from the other side back in October. That was the Gaza or the Hamas's, attack on the Israeli settlements. And when you look at the hard aspects to Pluto, and especially Mars and Pluto, they're like Mars. I always say that Mars starts the fights and Pluto finishes them. Because Mars Mars was the ancient ruler of Scorpio, and Pluto kind of came in and took over, so to speak, as Pluto does. But this square between Mars and Pluto, I think we will see another round of, how can things get worse from that standpoint? But whether it's that area specifically, but it's a hot spot time. And we're talking June 11th when Mars makes that exact square to Pluto. It'll be something to put on the map to watch and see what unfolds. But this is a really good time to not be afraid to confront the power, Pluto, but not necessarily do it because, not necessarily do it in a way that causes us to go off the road. We have to keep in mind here that we're playing a long haul game. It's like in chess. Sometimes it's really good to not attack something that looks like we can make a gain, because then strategically we might end up losing the game itself for some immediate thing. So I think that's the thing to keep in mind around the 11th when Mars squares Pluto.
I feel like we've been saying that for a while, actually since 2020, is we're playing a long game, but it sounds like it's absolutely true that we're in a decade where that is just the truth. So preserve our energy, don't die before the battle even happens, all those kinds of things.
Now, I think we get a little respite in some way, at least on the surface, because as we reach the middle of June, Venus, Mercury, and the Sun all move from Gemini into Cancer. The Sun is the last that does that on the first day of summer, on the summer solstice in the north, the winter solstice, down under. But as these planets move one by one into Cancer, I think it softens the energy. It pulls it in. It can certainly make us passive aggressive in some way. But on a deeper level, it slows down the energy enough. And again, we have Saturn slowing down toward its retrograde at the same time. And into this, we also then have on the 21st, the Capricorn full moon. And so a combination of all of this energy, the Capricorn full moon really happens on the same day as the summer solstice, because the moon moves into Cancer. And as it moves into Cancer, it's going to quincunx Pluto, as, again, everything makes aspects to Pluto as it changes signs. because Pluto is at the beginning of a sign, Aquarius. But as the moon moves into Capricorn, it opposes the sun in Cancer. And so we have this kind of polarity of our feeling, our home, our homeland, our heart, the Cancerian self-protective, the cautious energy emotionally that we've already begun to feel as Mercury and Venus, or Venus and Mercury in that order, moved into Cancer on the 16th and 18th. And now we have the full moon on the 21st of June. And so I think we're really stretched. We're feeling that polarity, and we're feeling it because we're not willing to take the lie anymore. And that lie may come from strange places, not just the quote unquote, quote, the obvious place where people are saying, well, that's the lie of blah, 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 blah. But because all of those planets, as they move from Gemini into Cancer, are going to all square Neptune, which is moving from Pisces into Aries, but not quite getting there. And so there's this whole kind of dynamic that comes out towards the middle and end of the month as those planets move from Gemini into Cancer and square Neptune. It's almost like it's like the emperor's no clothes, not new clothes. You know, there's that feeling that we're beginning to really, really see the invisibility of what we thought was the truth, and that the deceptions are still there, but I think that we're more seeing through them. And I think that that's a big piece of as we move toward the end of the month. So, I mean, there's lots else going on, but that's the sweep of the month, because as that's all unfolding, Saturn is slowing down. I mean, Saturn mid-month, it reaches 19 degrees of Pisces. And then as it turns retrograde at the end of the month, it's still at 19 degrees of Pisces. So it's, even though it doesn't turn retrograde until the end of the month, Saturn is at 19 degrees of Pisces for pretty much the entire month. I mean, it starts out the month at 18 degrees of Pisces and something. It's at 19 degrees of Pisces by June 7th, 8th. And it stays in that degree the entire month. And then when it turns retrograde, I mean, it pretty much, even though it goes retrograde, the end of the month, it stays at 19 degrees of Pisces for almost all of July.
Rick, do you use the Sabian symbols? Like, do you interpret 19 degrees and have you seen that impact?
The answer is I see value in the Sabian symbols. I have so much other information that I try to incorporate. I don't know them offhand, but do remember that if Saturn is at 19 degrees of Pisces for almost 2 months, that's the 20th degree of Pisces, not the 19th. Just like, if you're in your first year of life, you're 0 years old. When you hit your 30th birthday, you're now in your 31st year. So you got to be careful if you're using Sabian symbols, even though Saturn is at 19 degrees of Pisces throughout this whole time, that's the 20th degree.
Wow. Do people know that? I feel like that gets kind of glossed over.
Yeah. Well, anyone who does Sabian symbols knows that.
Knows to do that. Okay.
But people who just pick up a book and look, they may not realize that. But that's an important piece.
It is, because each degree is very distinct.
They are. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And Sabian symbols, I mean, I don't know how stuff works like that. Astrology, I always feel comfortable with, because I know how, this is maybe hubris, but I know how astrology works. I know why it works. I can see the relationship. But when you do something like the Sabian symbols and someone just channels this stuff out of the air, there's a part of me that says, I don't know how they work. But I do know that they do. I've just seen them work way too many times, consistently. And they're like brilliant because of the imagery that they present. They give us a way to move away from the rational right hand, left brain into the softer, intuitive, I shouldn't say softer because it can be very firm in its own, but into the, more imagination, right brain, left hand.
Yeah, it's a little more poetic. I mean, it's just there's something about it. Okay, so we have Saturn basically sitting at 19 degrees of Pisces, both for most of June and July, and moving retrograde. Is there anything you want to say specifically about Saturn's retrograde? Is there anything?
I would say the same thing about any planet retrograde. When it turns retrograde and when it is retrograde, it's stronger and louder than it normally is. And Saturn is often in most people's lives loud enough when it's not being loud, because it's authority and its stability and its resistance. And stability is good, but most people want to brush up against that authority. There are some people, like those of you who have Capricorn moons, Amanda, who actually work with Saturn in a way that's pretty damn healthy and make structures just happen naturally. And then there are those of us that sometimes have a harder time with those dates and deadlines and disciplines. And when Saturn goes retrograde, those things become magnified and we have to deal with them.
And how does Pisces, it's Capricorn sun and Venus and Mercury, not moon, Gemini moon. But Rick, what is it being in Pisces? Like, how does that?
Saturn in Pisces is an oxymoron all by itself.
Right.
Although my old astrology buddy, Jeff Jower, used to say that an oxymoron was a dumb Taurus.
I haven't heard you say that one. That's awesome.
But Saturn in Pisces is a bit oxymoronic because Saturn is creating structure and stability, and Pisces is the swamp where everything gets dissolved into the cesspool of the seas of consciousness, and there is no physicality. So, and it's interesting that Saturn in Pisces is somewhat symbolizing the Catholic Church, because there's the symbol of the fishes, and it's how do you make stability and structure out of that which absolutely has no, boundaries, God,
Wow.
And so Saturn in Pisces is a bit, do you know what Zeno's paradox is?
No.
Okay. Zeno, some Greek person who was a mathematician, philosopher, because the two of those went hand in hand then, basically said, if you're walking to a wall and in a certain amount of time you go halfway to the wall, and then in the next amount of time you go halfway to the wall, and you keep going halfway to the wall, you never reach the wall.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
That's Saturn in Pisces.
What's interesting is that the Catholic Church actually did that. They did create structure around the infinite in a way. In a way.
But then they said to every human being, but you can never reach there because you're a human.
Right. Oh, fascinating. Oh my gosh. There you go.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Anything else you want to tell us about June? Anything else that we need to know? Because this has been a lot and has been really good.
No, I'm sometimes much better at forecasting the past than the future. So we could talk about June again in a month.
That sounds great.
I could talk a lot about May and April right now.
Because they're
brilliant.
Yeah, it'll be brilliant. Okay. So Rick, to me, it seems like something that you said in the beginning is essentially the theme. Tell me if you agree. You said that we're getting a glimpse into the future.
Yeah.
And it seems like that is something that if we remember throughout the month, that we're getting a glimpse into the future and that we are in a very potent moment to actually do something about the future. Whereas when we get to 2025, 26, 27, 28, we're a little more baked. And so we're still, there's malleability in the energy still that we can work with.
Malleability is a good word. And what came to mind, and this may end up being my theme when I record my monthly, which I won't do for another couple of weeks, on June. We're recording this. Maybe I'm not supposed to say that, but we're recording this.
It's okay. We wanted to give people more time with the forecast this month. We're doing it earlier.
But what's come to mind is one of my favorite authors, Tom Robbins, wrote a book called Skinny Legs and All.
Okay.
And
these are the best titles.
Best books.
Yeah.
And in it, instead of having chapters, there's basically 7 sections to the book because it's based upon the dance of Salome. That was the dance of 7 veils.
Mm.
And in each of the acts of the dance, another veil was dropped.
Mm.
And it's almost like what we're getting as this glimpse of the future, we're getting another veil dropped. But the book title is At the Dropping of the 7th Veil, There She Was, Skinny Legs and All.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So in some way, this is Tom Robbins' book. The concept of something, this glimpse of the future is we're seeing it. And it may not be as pretty and as nice and as wonderful and as enticing and as attractive, but it's what is there, skinny legs and all.
Well, and it's also enjoy the process. If we're so focused on some sort of destination, then yeah, we might be disappointed about the skinny legs. But if we're actually just, there's part of that anticipation and the mystery of it. And so enjoying that would be a good idea for us.
Yeah.
Always. Right? Okay.
Always.
Rick, you are amazing. A few things for all of you out there.
So are you, Amanda. You are amazing.
It's so much fun to have you on. Every time you come on, I'm just like, oh, Rick, you're like this. Yeah, you're amazing. If you have not subscribed to our podcast yet, please do it now. And then also, if you like learning from Rick, we have a whole suite of courses from Rick Levine. We'll put the links in the show notes, but he takes you from the beginning all the way through to what's kind of like a level 3, but it's just layers and layers and layers of learning.
And I'm so excited about being the guide for the inner circle for the month of September. I should just say that. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Let's talk about that too. So we're going to drop the links for his whole entire foundation suite, but then also he is going to be the inner circle astrologer for September. This is going to be amazing. And I know that you're going to be teaching a mastery class on Mercury. Can you tell us? Yeah. Can you tell us about that? Why did you choose Mercury?
Well, because it's the Virgo time of year, that we're coming out of, really, but also because Mercury is often passed off as a lightweight, it's clever. It's, it's witty, and yet Mercury in the Greek world, Mercury was a psychopomp. Mercury was the dude who guides souls through the underworld, from here to there, across the river Styx. And so, so Mercury doesn't get the respect that sometimes we moderners, kind of, toss. And I would also say, I would be remiss to say that if people want more, that I'm teaching a 2-week retreat in Goa, India, at the end of November, and they can find out about that by sending me an email or,
Well, we can put your link in the show notes. Just to make sure we have it, Rick. We'll put that in the show notes.
Perfect. And that will sell out. It's limited to 35 people. It's at an Ayurvedic healing spa in the south end of Goa. It's magical. I love teaching at this place. And so we're looking at filling that up again and having a great time again. It's a magical thing every year. Yeah.
Let's fill it. Astrology Hubbers, go to India. That's going to be amazing with Rick. And anytime people come back from your retreats, Rick, they are raving about it. So that's awesome. So a couple links. And
I pay him a lot of money to say good things,
Well, it's working. Okay. So we're going to put these links in the show notes. There's astrologyhub.com/join-expand, which is where you can have Rick as one of your mastery class teachers, one of your guides. You'll have different astrologers each month. We have Christopher Renstrom right now. And then there's going to be some other astrologers that you'll have that are amazing. And then you'll get to Rick in September. If you want to study in the Astrology Foundations suite of courses that we have with Rick Levine, you can go to astrologyhub.com/study with Rick. I liked the Rick bundle one, but, and then we're going to put the link. Do you know off the top of your head what your link for your retreat is?
Well, Heaven and Earth Workshops, all one word.com. Heaven and Earth Workshops.com.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. And if you want us to come back and do some deep dives on some of these topics, let us know. So we could go deeper on some of the Uranus for 2 years was trine Pluto. Is that right? That's an interesting one. Then we have this whole time period, 2025 to 2028, which is also fascinating. So we can go into some more deep dives. Let us know in the comments if you would like that. And in the meantime, thank you so much for being here, everyone. Thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you for making astrology a part of your life. We will catch you on the next episode. Do you want to say your sign off, Rick?
Think cosmically, because that's what we do as astrologers, and act locally, because that's what we do as humans.
Voila. There you have it. Can't wait to catch you all in the next episode. Take care.